So hi everybody, it's nice to be here in Hackney. So I work as a psychologist, so that's the role I kind of get paid in, and I've got this kind of passion about trying to help people, individuals, perhaps even communities, come together and make sense of what we call madness or what we call mental illness. So yeah, I've been passionate about that for quite a long time, and that's kind of rooted in some of my own experiences, partly when I was 18, and not too far from here, was locked up in a hospital, Hackney Hospital in Homerton. Now I think it's Homerton Hospital, they've moved it a bit. And yeah, it's my own experiences and the experiences of people that I was locked up with, or not everyone was locked up. Some people I think asked to go in. I couldn't understand that myself. but yeah, those experiences of perhaps not feeling listened to really motivated me to train as a psychologist eventually, and sort of infiltrate the mental health system in a way, and come at it from the other side and try and change the way we think about madness, because I felt like I was just seen as somebody who was a bit of a loser really, and whose brain was going wrong and just needed the right treatment, and I didn't feel like my soul was seen really in that system generally. But there were people who did help. It wasn't all bad, but there was a general theme of being encouraged to take drugs and settle for that really. I was told I'd have to take drugs for the rest of my life, very strong drugs. I think a man begged a pound off me today, and I could tell he was on the medication that I was on, because it makes your mouth twitch and tends to certain types of weight gain and things like that. And I was worried when I was 18 that I was told I'd have to be on these drugs for the rest of my life. So I'm pretty biased really in my approach to the mind, because I probably received quite harsh, in some ways heavy-handed medical approach. So maybe some people have experienced a more benign, more balanced approach, but my experience was fairly heavy. I was given a label of schizophrenia, and that wasn't that helpful to me. I think I was going through some identity problems. I was struggling with my sense of place and belonging in the world, and with some emotional sense of isolation, loneliness, loss. My girlfriend had left me. I felt abandoned, and I think it brought up some other feelings of abandonment when I was younger. But no one tried to make those links, particularly because my granddad had had a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and my auntie had had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. So there was a sense of, oh, there's a blood lineage here. This is your heritage. This is where you're going, kind of thing. So I kind of very much had a different understanding that it was a meaningful experience, and I had friends who supported me with that, and managed to, maybe my problems were milder than some of the other people that I came across, but for whatever reason I managed to extricate myself from the system, partly by being quite rebellious and not taking the drugs, and believing in my potential, and connecting with different voluntary kind of work and things like that. So, and then I thought, well, maybe I can help other people extricate themselves from this stuckness that I found myself in at 18. Maybe by listening to people, that's the answer. I felt if I could get into the system and listen to people, that would help them transform. And I guess I still believe that. I guess I want to help create listening communities, so not just be the magician who goes in and helps, rescues people, because it doesn't really work like that. But I've discovered, but try and help us together learn to listen to each other and have a dialogue. So tonight I'm not going to talk too much at you and hopefully make it quite interactive. Somebody else is going to talk, and then hopefully after that we'll make it quite interactive. But yeah, as the title of the talk is Madness is a Creative Way of Dealing with Pain, I guess I like looking at the meaning of madness, but rather than seeing somebody's confusion or deep distress, seeing it as having a message, something that we can learn from, so that anxiety might be a messenger that we need to face some fear, some deep fear, and find safe ways to face that fear. Despair might be a messenger that we're exhausted, that we need new ways to look after ourselves, and to reconnect with parts of ourselves we're cut off from. So I haven't found a problem where I can't see a meaning in it, but I don't always know what that is, and there are many layers of meanings to people's distress and confusion. When I was 18, I believed I was a spy, and I can see lots of different kind of meanings in that. I think partly it was about trying to find a mission in life, trying to find a purpose in life. Kind of seeing myself as an apprentice spy gave me a sense of being special. I was looking for that. I was looking for direction. I'd lost the thread, really. And I meet a lot of people who are also looking for meaning in the environment. A bit like one of the poems was talking about finding those omens. Without a sense of belonging, we need creativity to find those omens. And one guy I'm trying to help, he's very, in a way, he's trying to find his mum. Seems to me, you know, his mum died when he was 5, and he's always reading messages from the number plates. Some of them warning him, some of them encouraging him. Like if it says Mark X, that's a kiss from his true mother, his true spiritual mother, and he needs that kind of yearning to be heard and heard. And when he feels heard, then he relaxes a bit from those beliefs and can navigate more mundane things like taking the kids to school. But he does need his own childhood, his own inner children to be heard. So I really hope that we can build a society that does that listening, you know, more. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but, and rely less on just numbing things with drugs or even with psychological strategies to make us think more rationally. There's still a kind of numbing going on, and so even in my own profession, I'm a bit wary of some of the mainstream stuff. So perhaps that's enough for now.
Yeah.
And I think somebody's going to come up and share a bit of their own experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Rufus.
Yeah. And then I'll come back.
Thank you, Rufus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello first.
No, I was going to ask you. So I think I'd like to model this. We'd like to model that listening community here. I really like that idea. I really like the idea that we are here as a listening community. We're going to hear people's stories. And Rufus was asked, we asked him to come and give a talk, and we said, we want to give a talk. I want to hear other people's voices as well. And so we asked us to ask some friends who might be able to talk about their experience of dealing with things that have been termed mental illness. So I asked my very good friend John, and John's going to talk to us. Do you want to come up, or do you want to stay there?
Do you want to stay here?
No, I don't mind. Yeah. If everyone else doesn't mind. Yeah.
So I was kind of delighted to do this because I've been really missing a project, and that can be quite difficult and quite damaging in life. And also, I've been going to poetry gigs about as long as I've been going to see psychiatrists. It's been a hell of a while. I did actually bump into Sam a couple of days ago and said, look, I think I've got one. I'm going to do the whatever his name is. First they came for the. Sam said, I've already written it, so I guess we'll get that later. That's probably a good thing, because mine was going to start, sorry mate, first they came for the nutters. And I don't mind, I kind of really don't mind those phrases. If I'm going to do like my story briefly, I mean, it's trouble at roughly the same time. 17, didn't like the world as I saw it, didn't like what it offered to me. Suicidal attempts, and found them phenomenally hard. So I went to the top of the tallest building in town, and I stood on the edge, and I couldn't jump. I wanted to jump. I was an arrogant atheist child who thought he had everything good and everything coming was going to be rubbish. And I kind of get where he was coming from. But so then I thought, okay, I'll do a running jump. I do a running jump and my legs freeze like 2 meters before the edge. So okay, I'll do a running jump with my eyes closed. And actually I end up then freezing like 3 or 4 meters to the edge, and then I kind of burst down in tears because I realised I'm completely out of control. My desire is out of control with my life, and actually my desire is out of control with my survival instinct. The whole thing's mental. And I see a psychiatrist, and at the time, best practice, I think, was to prescribe SSRIs, which I don't think they would ever do to suicidal teenagers nowadays without...
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Sorry. I'll move backwards. SSRIs to suicidal teenagers without pretty good supervision, I think, is now considered to increase the risk of suicide. And in the end, I did jump, and I'm able to stand up, but I've got wire in my back and all that kind of rubbish. I actually think I liked the guy I met then, and out of the 10, 12 psychiatrists I met, all but 2 I think have been good people. But they do work on this thing called, I think they certainly until very recently they've all worked on this thing called the Kropalian hypothesis, which is like schizophrenia is distinctly different from manic depression, is distinctly different from depression, is distinctly different from borderline personality disorder. They all have a physical cause that can be treated by a certain quantity of certain drugs in a regular basis. The profession is moving away from that, and it is crap, and I'm glad they are. And people like you in the psychology field are beginning to help people understand that it's a human response. And I think just on an evolutionary level, we kind of need people who respond differently to different social conditions, or the same social condition even, because we grew up as a social animal with a strong group in a changing environment. We need people who think things are good and some think things are not so good, and some see opportunities where others don't, and some take risks that others don't. And madness is, in those kind of communities, so well dealt with, and so terribly dealt with in ours. And I think it's getting a lot worse. I perhaps probably should have been institutionalised when I was 17. Maybe you shouldn't have been. But that's just, that's just how it goes. But in those days, at least, in the days before, there were institutions where people like Spike Milligan could go. Beautiful, beautiful nutter. Oh, and there's another poem, there's no treat like wash-pressed socks on wash-clean feet or something. He wrote in the mental home whilst being happily dosed up on Librium to taken away from the world. And I think Librium was a fantastic drug, and if I could get hold of it, I would take more. But these things were taken away and replaced with care in the community, which the media had a massive stigmatisation of mental illness when that started happening. And when they found any kind of thing where anyone had a problem or a diagnosis, and like ramped it up in the pages. But it worked pretty well because people were given enough money to get the care they needed, and actually institutions were damn expensive and sometimes quite brutal in terms of forced medication. And sometimes you're right, actually not taking the medication is a more sensible route to take. And if you've got the cash to get the care in the community works. But that's not where we are anymore. The institutions are gone, and the money is going down. And the assessment process, I guess this is what I really want to talk about, is truly, truly hideous. There's a continual process now of assessment, and I tried to write some stuff about it last night, and actually just remembering the stigma and the brutality and the fact that things get taken away from you and you have to justify it, and you're being called scroungers and all this kind of stuff completely messes up your mental state. And it's happening in our society today, and it's killing people. And it's killed people I know, more to the point. A friend of mine, a couple of weeks before he died, having before that been declared fit for work, came to me and said, it'll show them when I finally kill myself. And he had some support, but it obviously wasn't enough. I went through it last time, and I just shaking back and forwards, an absolute hideousness, but my support network was frankly fantastic, and there's actually at least one person in this room who's had a phone call from me in a mess in the middle of these processes and said, just fucking get on a train to London and, we'll do something about it. With the people I've had around me, and not everyone is. You can't ask everyone to be that lucky when the system is doing it, and it's not just me that's saying this happens. It's a system, and Atos are the guys doing the bully work. But they're just doing the bully work for a government that's made an economic and social decision that is going on, combined with the stigmatisation of scroungers and skivers. And I've just scribbled a few quotes on this, like consultant psychiatrist Ben Barr, University of Liverpool, found more than a death by suicide through this process in a year than would be expected. But would be expected? Like, we're just expecting like a whole bunch of nutters to top themselves. But look, there's 1,000 more because of this fucking process, sorry. And then there's Dr. Greg Woods, who was actually a former Atos assessor, who said on the BBC that medical knowledge is being twisted to remove care from patients, and that the process is cruel. And I know it's not only cruel, it's deadly. That's the thing. And the Independent, I think, identified 10,000 deaths between 2008 and 2013, and the Mirror, I think, did this investigation first. They were sort of something like 8,000 odd, 2011. All of these scroungers being brutalised by this process and then topping themselves, whilst the hard-working striver Thierry Breton, who's Atos' CEO, gets paid 2.4 million a year. But that's a bargain, because that's only 300 people on benefits, whereas he's wiped out 10,000. So he's cheap, man. It's loads. I'm sorry, this is actually not really not funny. And people who've been with me when I've gone through this process and know it's not funny. And I guess the big thing is, if as a result of a government cost strategy and social strategy, there was a train crash every other month killing 200 people, would we notice, and how would we feel? And it's even worse than that. It's more like that the ambulance not only decide not to treat 10% of heart attacks, but they turn up and deliberately poke the person to try and make them die and make it worse. And this is the terrible thing about my mate. And I did say to him that, you know how you feel, and everything's your choice, but my world, all the people's world, is going to be a lot poorer. And the sad thing is that it didn't make a difference. This guy being declared fit for work, it's not made a single fucking bit of difference. And it doesn't matter if Atlas is replaced by someone else, it's absolute strategy. So if we're genuinely going to care about this, and these many, many thousands of people, I mean, nutters of the world unite, you've got nothing to lose but your tulips, and I'm there, I'm with you. Yeah? But it can't just be nutters, because this is all our world, and the social impacts on the personal problem, and I would like, if somebody comes out of this, as well as the talking, listening group, something quite dynamic on this. My organisational skills are rubbish, so if anyone wants to come and volunteer, that would be great. Sorry, thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Zoe here.
Yeah, I am.
Zoe, did you want to speak a bit as well?
Yeah, I can. Maybe, I don't know if people can hear me from here. Maybe I will come over there.
I can hear you, I'm quite
You
far
can
away.
hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so I guess I haven't actually prepared anything and I don't have any notes, but that's not that unusual for me. But one thing I can definitely pick up on actually from both of you guys is the way that I ended up with a mental health diagnosis, which was that I was 21, and I had been at university for a year at the time, and I became depressed, and I started drinking to self-medicate. And it's actually quite a funny story, so just bear with me, okay? So anyway, so you know, as many people do, I drank a bit to deal with the fact that I was feeling depressed. And at one point, my brother said to me, you know, you're drinking a lot, Zoe. And I said, that really affect. My brother said it to me, so I went to the doctor and I said, I'm drinking and I've got heart palpitations and I feel really weird. So they gave me a load of ECGs. This was at where my parents lived. So they gave me loads of like tests, like ECGs, and you know, trying to test my physical health because my heart appeared to be palpitating. They didn't find anything wrong with me physically, and they didn't actually. It didn't occur to them to consider mental issues at all. So they put me on beta blockers, which worked really well actually. I was calmed down quite a lot by the beta blockers. Then I went back to uni, and I'd been there for a little while, and my mum said to me, I had a bit of a cough. I used to smoke a lot, and I had a really bad chest infection, so they said, go to the doctor. You know, my mum, go to the doctor, you're going to get really sick. And so I went to the doctor, and he said, are you on any medication? I said, I'm on beta blockers. And he, why are you on beta blockers? And I said, oh, because my heart seems to be palpitating. And he said, well, what is it? And I'm like, well, no, but they put me on beta blockers because they didn't really know, and that seemed to help. And he said, oh, well, you should be on Valium, obviously. So, you know, so he twigged that this was somehow mental health related issue, and he decided to put me on Valium, which then triggered, of course, a whole series of events, because a GP can't put someone on Valium and then just leave them. You're only supposed to be on Valium for absolute maximum 2 weeks. And this was like 10 years ago, so they're even less willing to give people things like Valium now than they were 10 years ago. And so I got put on Valium, and I was then put into a process of being assessed by a psychiatrist. And so I went for assessment, and the first person I saw was a junior psychiatrist, and she diagnosed me with depression, minor depression as I recall, and anxiety. I don't know if she diagnosed me with that because I was on Valium, you know, it's quite hard to know actually. She diagnosed me with that and gave me a very, very big dose of Prozac and sent me on my way with an appointment for a consultant psychiatrist in about 2 months' time. So I went back to uni, started taking Prozac, and very, very rapidly this all just went very, very bad. I reacted very, very badly to the Prozac. I went really, really high, and to this day I can't take SSRIs. I mean, that's been recognised. Me on SSRIs is like someone on speed. It's just not good, you know, they make me really sick. But I didn't have any idea, and also combined with Valium, it's a sort of, is that what they call a snowball effect? I don't know, it's like kind of both things at the same time having a different effect. So I went quite manic. I think by anyone's standards, I was definitely quite manic and quite energetic and not sleeping and things. And I had to leave uni. My uni asked me if I would take a temporary leave of absence because they could see that I wasn't able to do my work. So I did that, and I didn't want to go back to my parents' home. I wanted to live in Oxford still and be around my friends, and I didn't see it as something that was going to be really serious. At that point I thought that I could get a job and that I'd be alright for that year. Anyway, so I didn't really have a lot of care during that period, that interim period. And well, like quite a lot of mad stuff happened, but I'm not going to go into all the details just for the sake of brevity. But anyway, at some point I had a very, very bad experience where I tried to admit myself to the hospital during the night. And the hospital assessed me that night and said, you don't need to come to hospital, you're fine, go home. I happened to have the meeting with the consultant psychiatrist the next morning. So, by the way, this was in February, so they actually forcibly removed me from the mental health hospital at 2 in the morning in the middle of February. They thought that was a really good idea. And I was really trying to argue for my right to be there because I believed that I needed to be in hospital because I didn't feel well. I said, I'm on a lot of medicine and I feel sick, I don't feel very good. Anyway, there's a lot, if anyone wants to know the details, I can tell you about it later. But basically, the next morning, I went to this consultant psychiatrist who, within 5 minutes, and I'm not joking, really, within 5 minutes, he diagnosed me with manic depression. And one thing I wanted to say actually is what you were saying when I came in late was about how you got diagnosed because of your blood lineage. And it's exactly the same story with me. I said, how can you know that I have manic depression? Isn't that a cycling mental illness? I thought I was very clever. And he said, your grandmother had it really, really badly, and it's probably very likely that you have it, and you have lots of the symptoms. And I was like, okay, fine. So you're going to put me back into the very same ward that I was trying to admit myself to the night before, during which less than 24 hours had passed, and I had severely traumatic experience during the interim period. So anyway, I went to the hospital quite willingly because I knew that I needed help at that point. I was not feeling very well. And I was on that ward for a while. They tried me on lots of different medicine. And this guy this consultant psychiatrist was kind of somewhat of an expert in manic depression. So he was very happy to have me, and he always thought that I was this really great manic depressive patient, that he could always talk to me even when I was super mad. He said I was always lucid, which actually, to be honest, was good for me because he worked with me and he didn't let me ever get sectioned, for example, because he would reason with me, come into hospital now, come with me now, kind of thing, and then we won't have to come round and get you later. So it was cool. I was all right in that situation. One of the things I'd like to say that doctor said to me was that I would always have manic depression. He said to me, and I remember this, it's hard to actually believe it, he actually said to me that I would never be able to maintain a meaningful relationship.
Oh, wow. Nice.
He said those words to me when I was 21, 22. So that had a huge impact on me as a person, as I've grown up to notice more and more. It's hard to get that out of your head when someone who's such a specialist tells you that. He also made me believe that I would always have manic depression. So that's that kind of thing. I mean, actually, I went through Mind housing, and I had very good treatment from Mind, for example. They really looked after me at that point, and I managed to eventually come off medication. Of course, the way I came off medication, the doctors wanted me to be on loads of medication. They were really into me being on huge amounts of medication. And they tried me on various different kinds of medication. I've been on really loads of different mood stabilizers. They realized really quickly that SSRIs were a really bad idea. Funnily enough, actually, they put me on something called sodium valproate, which anyone who knows anything about psychiatric medicine may have heard of. Sodium valproate is a mood stabilizer. It's a slightly more modern form of lithium. And sodium valproate gave me a really weird side effect, but it's not a known side effect, but I knew that it was from that medicine. So I wanted to decrease my dose of sodium valproate. The doctor would not allow that, so I just did it on my own. I was also on Valium for like a year and a half at least. They just put up my dose of Valium rather than decreasing it. Well, and so I was on 30 milligrams of Valium a day, which isn't as much as some people get, but it's a lot. Anything. I mean, it's interesting for people to hear the background of it. But the thing that I really carry with me is this feeling that you get labeled for life. And I've been thinking about it since I got asked to speak tonight, about what that actually means to be labeled for life like that, and whether it's really true. yeah, and then that connects with stigma as well on a very big level. I think that, yeah, I mean, just to summarise basically the story about my diagnosis and all that, I mean, after 2 years I came off medicine completely on my own. I didn't tell the doctors. I stopped taking Valium successfully, cold turkey actually. I just said I'm not going to take it anymore, and I stopped taking it. And I put it into a drawer, and every time I wanted to have some, I would smoke weed. I got quite addicted to weed. Thankfully, I'm now no longer addicted to weed, but I actually used it to get me off, to be honest. That's how I got myself off Valium. The only time I've ever heard a voice was when I was withdrawing from Valium, so I think it was related to that actually. And it was a very scary voice telling me, you need Valium. And I was like, no I don't, stop that. It would be ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, basically I got off all this medicine, and I started